The ground vibrated beneath them as the unmistakable sound of multiple heavy vehicles approaching at speed grew louder. Reeves's practiced confidence evaporated in an instant, replaced by the wary alertness of a predator sensing danger. "Your ranch hands drive military vehicles?" he demanded, his hand now fully resting on what James could now clearly identify as a taser. "I never said they were all ranch hands," James replied, allowing himself the smallest smile as the first olive-drab Humvee crested the ridge, suspension compressing as it dropped onto the main access road. Behind it, two more followed in tight formation, with a pair of civilian pickup trucks bringing up the rear. Reeves's face drained of color. "What the hell is this?" he hissed, instinctively backing toward his SUV. "That," Eric said from his kneeling position, all pretense of submission gone from his voice, "would be Echo Company, 2nd Battalion, 7th Cavalry Regiment. My unit." The vehicles executed a textbook containment maneuver, forming a semicircle that blocked any potential escape route. Dust billowed around them as they skidded to a halt, and the doors opened simultaneously with military precision. Captain Rodriguez emerged first, his training fatigues contrasting with the intensity in his eyes. Lieutenant Vasquez flanked him, her JG insignia visible even from a distance. Behind them, 6 soldiers moved with the fluid efficiency of men who had trained together through the worst conditions imaginable. "Staff Sergeant Henderson," Rodriguez called out, his voice carrying the natural authority of command. "Situation report." Despite his kneeling position and the handcuffs, Eric's response was pure military professionalism. "Sir, detained by individual claiming to be code enforcement. Suspect attempted extortion and made threats regarding military standing." Rodriguez approached Reeves with measured steps, his gaze never wavering. "Identify yourself and explain why one of my soldiers is restrained." The transformation in Reeves was as immediate as it was pathetic. The intimidating posture collapsed, his shoulders hunched, and his voice rose nearly an octave. "There's been a misunderstanding," he stammered. "I'm conducting preliminary compliance checks for the county." "There are no compliance officers authorized for this area," Lieutenant Vasquez interjected, her legal training evident in her precise tone. "And no civilian authority has jurisdiction to detain active military personnel without due process." 2 soldiers with military police armbands approached at Rodriguez's signal. One knelt to release Eric while the other stood directly in front of Reeves, close enough that the imposter had to tilt his head back to meet his gaze. "Sir, I need to see your identification," the MP stated firmly. Reeves fumbled for his fake credentials, but his hands shook so badly he dropped them in the dust. When he reached to retrieve them, his shirt rolled up, revealing that his supposed weapon was nothing more than a realistic-looking airsoft gun, modified to resemble a taser. "Check his vehicle," Rodriguez ordered, and 2 more soldiers moved toward the SUV. What they found inside caused even the combat-hardened captain to stiffen with anger. "Sir," one called out, holding up a laptop. "Personnel files, deployment schedules, family addresses. At least 20 soldiers from our unit and others at Fort Cavazos." Rodriguez's expression hardened as he turned back to Reeves, who had now fully abandoned any pretense of authority and was backing away with his hands raised. "You picked the wrong soldier to target," he said quietly, a statement all the more menacing for its restraint. "And you definitely picked the wrong day to do it." "I said step away from the vehicle, soldier," Reeves commanded, his voice taking on a drill sergeant's authority that seemed practiced, almost rehearsed. Eric complied with deliberate slowness, hands visible at his sides, a combat veteran's instinct when facing an unstable individual with possible access to weapons. "You mentioned the Central Texas Property Standards Bureau," Eric said evenly, subtly shifting his weight to what James recognized as a defensive stance. "I've never heard of that agency. Do you have jurisdiction outside of residential developments?" Reeves's expression flickered, a momentary crack in his facade. "We have expanded authority under Senate Bill 47, he countered without hesitation. The Henderson property has been grandfathered into the Hidden Creek Development Zone as of last month." James stepped from behind the oak tree, no longer concerned with concealment. "That's interesting," he called out, continuing to record on his phone. "Considering I'm James Henderson, and there's been no notification of any zoning changes." He approached slowly, cataloging details: the cheaply printed logo on Reeves's uniform, the absence of any official vehicle markings besides the magnetic signs, the radio that hadn't actually transmitted to anyone. Reeves's hand jerked toward his hip again, and James noticed Eric tense. "Stay where you are?" Reeves barked, producing handcuffs with his other hand. "You're interfering with an official inspection." "No, I'm protecting my property from trespassing," James replied, phone still recording. "Unless you produce legitimate credentials right now, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." What happened next occurred with shocking speed. Reeves lunged forward, grabbing Eric's wrist and twisting it behind his back. Eric, who could have easily neutralized the larger man with his combat training, hesitated. A critical split-second of uncertainty about the legal consequences of fighting someone claiming official authority. "You're under detention for violation of property codes and resisting an enforcement officer," Reeves shouted, loud enough that James suspected it was for the benefit of his recording device, rather than anyone present. The handcuffs snapped shut around Eric's right wrist, the metal biting into skin. James sprinted forward, but stopped short when Reeves reached for what appeared to be a weapon. "Back off, or I'll tase him," Reeves threatened, now fully committed to his charade. Military personnel assaulting a code enforcement officer is a federal offense. James raised his hands placatingly, mind racing. Okay, let's all calm down." He needed to keep Reeves talking, establish more evidence of his deception. "What exactly is the violation you're citing?" Sweat beaded on Reeves's forehead, despite the cool autumn air. "Military vehicle storage, unauthorized display of government insignia, and," he faltered momentarily, "potential terrorist material transport." The absurdity of the accusations might have been comical if not for the very real handcuffs restraining Eric and the increasingly erratic behavior of his captor. James caught Eric's eye, a silent communication passing between them. Asterisk, "Don't fight back yet. We need to understand what this is really about." Asterisk. "You're making a mistake," Eric said quietly to Reeves, his military bearing never slipping despite the humiliation of being detained on his family's own land. "Whatever you think you're doing, there's still time to walk away from this." Reeves responded by roughly securing the second cuff, completing Eric's restraint. "On your knees." Now, James lowered himself to one knee behind the oak trees, keeping his breathing steady as he observed the confrontation unfolding at the edge of his property. The man who had emerged from the black Suburban was built like a linebacker gone to seed, broad shoulders, but with the soft middle of someone whose physical prime had passed years ago. What troubled James most wasn't the man's size, but his eyes, cold, calculating, and darting constantly around the property as if mapping escape routes. Eric remained half inside his truck, one boot planted firmly on the gravel, his military training evident in how he positioned himself, never fully exposed, maintaining tactical advantage. 3 tours overseas had taught him to recognize threats before they fully materialized. "Sir, I need you to exit your vehicle completely and present identification," the man barked, adjusting what appeared to be a tactical belt with several pouches and a holstered object partially concealed by his untucked shirt. "This is a restricted residential development zone." James felt his pulse quicken. The nearest residential development was 15 miles south, and this part of the county had successfully fought off developers for decades. His grandfather's old Winchester rifle leaned against a fence post 50 yards away, close enough if needed, but he prayed it wouldn't come to that. "This is private property," Eric replied, his voice measured but firm. The sun glinted off his dog tags as he straightened to his full height. "There's no development or HOA here. Who are you with exactly?" The man, Reeves, as they would later learn, reached inside his jacket and produced a laminated card in a leather holder. From James's position, it looked official enough to fool someone who wasn't expecting trouble, with gold embossing and an official-looking seal. "Malcolm Reeves, Chief Enforcement Officer." Central Texas Property Standards Bureau. The practiced confidence in his voice suggested he'd done this before. We've had reports of unauthorized military equipment on this property and zoning violations need immediate attention. Eric's jaw tightened, a tell that James recognized from childhood. His cousin was transitioning from confused to angry. "Show me your credentials again, please." Slowly this time. James used the distraction to edge closer, moving from tree to tree. Through the zoom on his phone camera, he captured clear images of the man's face, vehicle, and the fake badge. The SUV's license plate was partially obscured by mud. Deliberate, James suspected. "Step away from the vehicle now," Reeves demanded, his hand moving to his waistband. "This is your final warning before I issue citations that will result in property liens and military disciplinary notification." The mention of military discipline was what confirmed James's suspicions. This wasn't random. This man had specifically targeted Eric, a soldier returning to family property. But why? What was the real agenda here? James's thumb hovered over the emergency call button as he watched Reeves take an aggressive step toward his cousin. Whatever happened next, he needed to ensure there was evidence. He pressed record, never suspecting that within minutes, this quiet Friday afternoon on his family ranch would escalate into a confrontation that would eventually uncover a criminal enterprise preying on military families across 3 states. 3 weeks after the incident, James stood on the ranch house porch watching as a convoy of personal vehicles wound their way up the gravel drive. The autumn sun cast long shadows across the property as Eric directed the arriving families toward the sprawling oak grove, where tables had been set up for the barbecue. Sheriff Martinez's cruiser appeared at the rear of the procession, its official presence a comfort rather than a concern now. The sheriff had become a regular visitor since the arrest, bringing updates on the expanding investigation that had grown far beyond what anyone had initially suspected. "Quite a turnout," Martinez commented as he climbed the porch steps, accepting the glass of iced tea James offered. "Half the base must be here." "Word travels fast when someone's targeting military families," James replied. "This is just Echo Company and some of the others who were on Reeves's hit list." Martinez nodded, his expression somber. "FBI just finished their search of the compound out near Ozona. Found evidence linking Reeves and his associates to at least 47 successful extortion attempts across 3 states. Totals over $240,000 now." James watched as children chased each other between the oak trees, their laughter a stark contrast to the serious conversation. Any chance of recovering the money for the families? "Some of it," Martinez confirmed. They'd converted a lot to cryptocurrency, but the tech boys managed to trace most transactions. The real win is shutting down their operation before they could expand. Captain Rodriguez approached, out of uniform in jeans and a t-shirt, but still carrying himself with natural authority. "Sheriff, good to see you," he greeted Martinez. "I hear we owe you thanks for expediting those search warrants." Martinez shrugged modestly. When the FBI counter-terrorism unit gets involved, paperwork tends to move faster. Those stolen deployment schedules pushed this well beyond simple fraud. The conversation paused as a Texas Department of Public Safety helicopter performed a low flyover, a symbolic gesture arranged by a senior officer whose daughter had been among those targeted while her husband was deployed overseas. "The Army's implementing new protocols for personnel data security," Rodriguez said, watching the helicopter disappear over the horizon. "And Fort Cavazos is establishing a direct line with your office for potential civilian scams targeting soldiers." Eric joined them, the fading marks on his wrists the only visible reminder of his ordeal. "The latest briefing mentioned 3 more arrests in Oklahoma," he reported. "Same operation, different jurisdiction." James surveyed the gathering, soldiers and families unified by their shared experience, finding strength in community rather than remaining isolated victims. What Reeves had never understood was that the military wasn't just a collection of individuals in uniform, it was a family that protected its own. "You know," James said quietly, "my grandfather bought this land after coming home from World War II. Said you wanted a place where a man could live free from anyone telling him how to exist. He smiled as he watched the children playing, safe and untroubled. I think he'd appreciate how it's being used today. As the sun began to set, turning the Texas sky into a canvas of orange and purple, the sounds of laughter and conversation filled the air. What had begun as a frightening confrontation had transformed into something powerful, a community united against those who would prey on the vulnerable, and a reminder that some bonds transcend uniform, geography, and circumstance. Sheriff Martinez raised his glass in a subtle toast to the unexpected benefits of having an army unit right down the road. Eric knelt on the gravel, the sharp stones digging into his knees through his ACU pants. The position was humiliating, a staff sergeant forced to submit on his own family's land. But his military training had taught him to recognize when temporary compliance was the safest option. The wild look in Reeves's eyes suggested a man operating on the edge of control. James, there's a business card in my truck. Captain Rodriguez's contact, Eric said calmly, his words carefully chosen. Maybe you could let him know I'll be delayed for our barbecue tonight. James nodded, understanding the coded message. The emergency contact had already been triggered, but this confirmed Eric wanted full military involvement. Sure thing. Mind if I grab it from your glove compartment? Reeves stepped between James and the truck. Nobody touches anything until my backup arrives. He pulled out his phone, turning away slightly while keeping Eric in his peripheral vision. James used the moment to scan the SUV more carefully, noting the partially open rear hatch. Through the gap, he could see stacks of official-looking documents, several different uniforms hanging on a portable rack, and most disturbingly, a laptop screen displaying what appeared to be personnel files with military ID photos. This was no random encounter. This was a targeted operation. Central Dispatch. This is Officer Reeves requesting immediate backup at the Henderson property. Reeves spoke into his phone with exaggerated formality. I have one subject detained and another non-compliant. Possible military contraband on site. James fought to keep his expression neutral. There was no dispatch, no backup. Reeves was performing for their benefit. But why? What was the endgame here? Sir, James addressed Reeves, deliberately softening his tone. I think there's been a misunderstanding. If you could just explain exactly what violations you're citing, maybe we can resolve this without escalation. Reeves pocketed his phone, a calculating look replacing his previous agitation. The Henderson property has been flagged for multiple violations. There's a $4,300 fine that needs immediate payment, or we'll place a lien on the property. Additionally, your cousin's military standing will be reported for the unauthorized transport of government property. And there it was, the shakedown. James had heard rumors about scams targeting military families, but never expected to encounter one firsthand. That sounds serious, James replied, playing along while angling his phone to better capture Reeves's face. Do you accept credit cards for these fines, or would you prefer cash? The question provoked an immediate response. A flash of avarice crossed Reeves's features. Cash is preferred for immediate resolution. Credit cards require additional processing time and fees. Eric remained silent, his eyes communicating a clear message to James. Asterisk, keep him talking. Help is coming, asterisk. From their position near the front gate, neither man could see the eastern ridge of the property, where dust was already rising from approaching vehicles. What James could see, however, was the GPS tracking app on his phone, showing 7 blue dots moving rapidly toward their location. Captain Rodriguez had received the emergency alert and activated the quick reaction protocol established for soldiers in distress. I may need to go to the house for that much cash, James said, stalling for time. How much did you say it was again? And will you be providing an official receipt for the Army's reimbursement process? Reeves's confidence visibly wavered at the mention of documentation. Receipts are processed through the central office. I can provide a temporary payment verification. In the distance, barely audible, came the first sounds of diesel engines pushing hard across rough terrain. Reeves's head snapped up, his hand instinctively moving toward his waistband. That'll be the ranch hands returning from the south pasture, James lied smoothly. They always drive too fast.